Elena Martinez had been working at Rosario's Italian restaurant for 3 years, and in all that time, she had perfected the art of becoming invisible. The small, family-owned establishment in Little Italy served as a front for much darker business, though Elena pretended not to notice the hushed conversations in the back corner booth or the way certain customers never looked at their menus. Every Tuesday and Friday evening, Vincent Torino would arrive at exactly 8 o'clock. He was impossible to ignore with his expensive tailored suits, commanding presence, and the way other patrons seemed to shrink into their seats when he entered. Vincent was the youngest don in the city's history, having inherited his father's empire at 28 after a rival family's assassination attempt went wrong. Elena had served Vincent countless times, always maintaining professional distance. She would approach his table with steady hands, take his order without making eye contact, and deliver his food with practiced efficiency. To Vincent, she was simply part of the furniture, another nameless face in his carefully controlled world. "The usual, Mr. Torino?" Elena would ask, her voice barely above a whisper. Vincent never bothered to look up from his newspaper or phone. "Yeah, whatever," he would grunt, dismissing her with a wave of his hand. Elena had learned to expect nothing more. She knew her place in his world. She was nobody, just a waitress trying to make ends meet while putting herself through nursing school. Her dreams were small but meaningful. Finish her degree, maybe work at the children's hospital downtown, and eventually save enough money to bring her younger sister Maria to America from their hometown in Mexico. The restaurant's owner, Giuseppe Rosario, had warned her early on about the nature of some of his clientele. "You see nothing, you hear nothing, you say nothing," he had told her with kind but serious eyes. "These men, they live in a different world than us. Best to stay invisible." Elena took this advice to heart. She watched as Vincent conducted his business meetings, speaking in low tones with men who looked like they could break someone in half without breaking a sweat. She observed how he commanded respect from everyone around him, how people jumped to fulfill his every request, how he carried himself like a king in his domain. But Elena also noticed things others missed. She saw how Vincent's jaw would tighten when he thought no one was looking, the way his fingers would drum against the table when he was thinking, the exhaustion that sometimes flickered across his features between phone calls. She noticed he never finished his food, always ate alone despite being surrounded by people, and how he would sometimes stare out the window with an expression she couldn't quite identify. One particularly busy Friday evening, Elena was rushing between tables when she accidentally bumped into Vincent's chair while serving the table behind him. His expensive watch caught on her apron and clattered to the floor. "I'm so sorry, sir," Elena gasped, immediately dropping to retrieve the watch. Her hands shook as she picked it up, expecting an explosion of anger. Vincent finally looked at her directly for the first time. His dark eyes met hers for a brief moment, and Elena felt her breath catch. There was something intense and unreadable in his gaze, but instead of the anger she expected, there was merely indifference. "Be more careful," he said flatly, taking the watch without their fingers touching. "And get me another scotch." Elena nodded quickly and hurried away, her heart pounding. She had looked into the eyes of one of the most dangerous men in the city, and he had looked right through her like she was nothing. For weeks after that incident, their interactions remained exactly the same. Vincent continued to treat Elena like she was invisible, never acknowledging their brief moment of eye contact. She continued to serve him efficiently and silently, though she found herself stealing glances at him more often, curious about the man behind the reputation. Elena's routine rarely varied. She worked at the restaurant 4 nights a week, attended nursing classes during the day, and spent her free time studying or sending money home to her family. Her life was simple but purposeful, built around achieving her goals and staying out of trouble. She shared a tiny apartment with her roommate Carmen, who worked at a bakery nearby. Carmen often teased Elena about her mysterious and dangerous customers, but Elena always deflected these conversations. She had no interest in getting involved with that world, no matter how intriguing some of the people in it might seem. "You should smile more at the handsome ones," Carmen would suggest while they ate dinner together. "Maybe one of them will tip you better." Elena would laugh and shake her head. "I'm not looking for that kind of attention. I just want to finish school and start my real career." What Elena didn't know was that her invisibility was about to come to an abrupt end. Vincent's world was shifting in ways that would soon pull her from the shadows and into the spotlight, whether she wanted it or not. The careful distance she had maintained was about to crumble, and the life she had worked so hard to build was about to change forever. Vincent's business was expanding, which meant new enemies and new dangers. His lieutenant, Marco, had been pushing him to increase security and change his patterns. "You're too predictable, boss," Marco had warned during their last meeting. "Same restaurants, same times. Makes you an easy target." But Vincent valued routine and control. Rosario's had become his sanctuary, a place where he could think and plan without interruption. He had no intention of changing his habits for anyone, not even for his own safety. Elena continued her work, unaware that her world was about to collide with Vincent's in ways she never could have imagined. She focused on her studies, her goals, and maintaining the invisibility that had kept her safe in a dangerous world. Soon, however, she would learn that sometimes being invisible isn't enough to protect you from the consequences of other people's choices. Everything changed on a cold Thursday evening in October when Elena wasn't even supposed to be working. Carmen had come down with flu, and Elena had agreed to cover her shift at the restaurant to help Giuseppe during his busiest night of the week. Elena was clearing tables near the kitchen when she noticed Vincent wasn't alone in his usual booth. Sitting across from him was a woman Elena had never seen before. The stranger was stunning in an obvious way, with platinum blonde hair, red lips, and a designer dress that probably cost more than Elena made in 6 months. The woman leaned forward as she spoke, her hand resting on Vincent's arm in a gesture that seemed both intimate and possessive. Elena tried not to stare, but something about the scene made her uncomfortable. Vincent appeared tense, his usual controlled demeanor slightly strained. "Isabella Romano," Giuseppe whispered to Elena as she passed by him near the bar. His voice carried a warning tone. "Daughter of Anthony Romano from the East Side family. Very dangerous territory." Elena nodded and continued her work, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something important was happening at that corner booth. Isabella's laugh was too loud, her touches too frequent, and Vincent's responses too measured. It looked like a performance rather than a genuine conversation. As the evening progressed, Elena noticed other changes in the restaurant's atmosphere. 2 men she didn't recognize sat at the bar, nursing drinks but watching everything around them with sharp eyes. Another unfamiliar face occupied a table near the window, barely touching his food while his gaze regularly swept the room. When Elena approached Vincent's table to refill their drinks, Isabella looked up at her with calculating eyes. "You're new here?" Isabella said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "No, ma'am. I've been working here for 3 years," Elena replied quietly, avoiding eye contact with both of them. Isabella's eyebrows raised slightly. "Really? Vincent, darling, do you know this girl?" Vincent glanced at Elena with the same indifferent expression he always wore. "She's just the waitress," he said dismissively. "Been invisible for years." The word invisible stung more than Elena expected, though she kept her expression neutral. Isabella laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "How funny. I guess some people are just meant to blend into the background," Isabella said, her tone dripping with condescension. Elena finished serving their drinks and walked away, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. She had grown used to Vincent's indifference, but having it displayed so casually in front of someone else felt different, more humiliating. What Elena didn't know was that Isabella Romano had come to the restaurant with a specific purpose. Her father's family had been at war with Vincent's organization for months, fighting over territory and drug distribution routes. The violence had escalated recently, and both families were looking for advantages over the other. Isabella had volunteered for a dangerous mission: get close to Vincent Torino and learn his weaknesses. Her father had been skeptical at first, but Isabella had convinced him that Vincent's reputation for being unattached to women made him a perfect target for seduction. "Men like him think they're untouchable," Isabella had told her father during their planning meeting. "But every man has a weakness. I just need to find his." Over the next several weeks, Isabella became a regular fixture at Vincent's table. She would arrive shortly after he did, always dressed to perfection, always with a new story or piece of gossip to share. Elena watched their interactions with growing unease, though she couldn't explain why Vincent's potential romance bothered her so much. Vincent seemed to tolerate Isabella's presence rather than enjoy it, but he didn't send her away. Elena overheard fragments of their conversations as she worked nearby, picking up mentions of business deals, family connections, and social events in their shared world. "You should come to the charity gala next month," Isabella suggested during one of their dinners. "All the important families will be there. It would be good for people to see us together." Vincent nodded non-committally. "Maybe. I'll have to check my schedule." Elena found herself paying more attention to these conversations than she should have, and she began to notice patterns that troubled her. Isabella asked too many questions about Vincent's business, his security arrangements, his daily routines. Her inquiries seemed casual, but there was something calculated about them that set off warning bells in Elena's mind. During her nursing classes, Elena had learned to trust her instincts about people. Working in healthcare required the ability to read patients, to notice when something wasn't right, even if you couldn't immediately identify what it was. Those same instincts were now screaming at her about Isabella Romano. One evening, while Elena was wiping down tables after closing, she overheard Giuseppe on the phone in his office. His door was slightly ajar, and his voice carried into the dining room. "I don't like it, Marco," Giuseppe was saying. "That Romano girl, she's asking too many questions. My staff is starting to notice things." Elena froze, her cleaning cloth motionless in her hands. "Vincent thinks he's in control, but that family is dangerous," Giuseppe continued. "They've been planning something for months. This romance, it doesn't feel right." Elena quickly finished cleaning and left the restaurant, but Giuseppe's words echoed in her mind during her walk home. She had suspected something was off about Isabella, but hearing confirmation of her instincts made the situation feel more urgent and dangerous. The next time Isabella visited the restaurant, Elena paid even closer attention. She noticed how Isabella's eyes would dart around the room when Vincent wasn't looking, how she seemed to memorize details about the layout, the staff, the security measures. Elena also observed that Isabella's affection for Vincent seemed performed, lacking genuine warmth or spontaneity. Elena found herself in an impossible position. She was nobody important, just a waitress who Vincent barely acknowledged existed. How could she possibly warn him about something she had no proof of? Who would believe her suspicions about Isabella Romano, especially when those suspicions were based more on intuition than concrete evidence? But as the weeks passed and Isabella's visits became more frequent, Elena's concern grew into genuine fear. She could see that Isabella was building towards something, gathering information and establishing trust for some larger purpose. Vincent might be powerful and dangerous, but Elena could see that he was walking into a trap. The weight of this knowledge pressed down on Elena's shoulders as she continued her daily routine. She served Vincent and Isabella their meals, listened to their conversations, and watched Isabella's careful manipulation of a man who prided himself on being untouchable. Elena knew that soon something terrible was going to happen, and she was the only person who seemed to see it coming. The question that haunted her was whether she had the courage to do something about it, and whether Vincent would listen to a warning from someone he had always treated as invisible. Elena's worst fears came true on a rainy Saturday evening in late November. She was working an extra shift to earn money for her nursing school books when everything fell apart in the span of 10 minutes. Isabella had arrived early that night, before Vincent's usual time, and she seemed more nervous than Elena had ever seen her. The blonde woman kept checking her phone and glancing toward the door. When Vincent finally entered at 8:15, 15 minutes later than usual, Isabella's relief was visible. "You're late, darling," Isabella said as Vincent settled into his seat. "I was starting to worry." "Traffic was heavy," Vincent replied, but Elena noticed his jaw was tight with tension. Something had already put him on edge before he arrived. As Elena approached their table to take their drink orders, she heard Isabella speaking in a lower tone than usual. "There's something I need to tell you about your shipment tomorrow night," Isabella was saying. "My cousin works at the docks, and he mentioned some unusual activity in that area." Vincent's eyes sharpened, focusing completely on Isabella for the first time since Elena had been watching them together. "What kind of activity?" "Extra security, some new faces asking questions," Isabella continued, her performance flawless. "I thought you should know, just in case." Elena felt her blood run cold. Isabella was feeding Vincent false information about his own business operations, setting him up for something terrible. The urgency of the situation hit Elena like a physical blow, but she was trapped in her role as the invisible waitress, unable to speak without revealing that she had been eavesdropping. As Elena served their drinks, her hands trembling slightly, she caught Vincent's eye for just a moment. In that brief connection, she tried to communicate her fear and concern, but Vincent looked through her as he always did. To him, she was still nothing more than part of the background. Elena retreated to the kitchen, her mind racing. She knew she had to do something, but approaching Vincent directly seemed impossible. He would never believe a waitress over Isabella Romano, especially when Elena couldn't explain how she knew Isabella was lying without admitting to spying on their private conversations. 20 minutes later, Elena's decision was made for her. She was bringing fresh bread to a table near the front window when she spotted them. 3 black SUVs parked across the street, their engines running, their windows tinted dark. The vehicles hadn't been there when she had looked outside an hour ago. Elena's nursing training had taught her to think quickly in emergencies, and every instinct she possessed was screaming that this was an emergency. Isabella had lured Vincent here tonight and fed him false information to keep him distracted while her father's men moved into position. Without allowing herself time to reconsider, Elena walked directly to Vincent's table and leaned down as if she was clearing empty plates. "There are 3 cars across the street that weren't there before," she whispered urgently. "I think you're in danger." Vincent's head snapped up, his dark eyes meeting hers with shock and confusion. "What did you say?" Isabella looked between them, her perfect composure slipping for the first time. "What's wrong? What is she talking about?" "Nothing," Vincent said slowly, his gaze never leaving Elena's face. "Just a misunderstanding." But Elena could see that Vincent was processing her warning, his mind already calculating possibilities and threats. She had finally broken through his indifference, but whether she had done it in time remained to be seen. "I need to use the restroom," Vincent said suddenly, standing up from the table. "Order me another scotch. I'll be right back." Instead of heading toward the restroom, Vincent walked to the front window and looked outside. Elena watched from across the room as his entire body tensed. He had seen the SUVs, and he understood what they meant. Vincent pulled out his phone and made a quick call, speaking in rapid, hushed Italian. Within minutes, Elena heard the sound of motorcycles approaching from the back alley, and she knew Vincent's security team was responding to his summons. When Vincent returned to the table, his demeanor had completely changed. The casual, relaxed man who had been dining with Isabella was gone, replaced by the cold, calculating Don who had built an empire through intelligence and ruthlessness. "Isabella," Vincent said, his voice deadly quiet. "Tell me again about your cousin at the docks." Isabella's face went pale, but she maintained her innocent expression. "What do you mean? I told you. He mentioned some unusual activity." "Strange," Vincent replied, settling back into his seat with predatory grace. "Because I don't have any shipments scheduled for tomorrow night. In fact, I haven't had any dock operations in that area for 3 weeks." The color drained completely from Isabella's face, and Elena could see panic flickering in her eyes. The carefully planned seduction and betrayal was unraveling, and Isabella knew she had been caught. "I must have misunderstood," Isabella stammered. "You know how men talk. Sometimes the details get mixed up." Vincent's smile was cold and dangerous. "Yes, details do get mixed up. Like how you somehow knew I would be here tonight 15 minutes late, when I only decided to stop by at the last minute." Elena realized she was holding her breath as the confrontation unfolded. Isabella had been exposed, but she was still dangerous, and the men in the SUVs outside were still waiting. "Vincent, please," Isabella began, but he held up a hand to silence her. "The only reason you're still breathing is because we're in a public place," Vincent said quietly. "But that protection won't last forever." Isabella stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "This is ridiculous. I don't have to listen to these accusations." "No," Vincent agreed, "you don't. But you should know that your father's men across the street are about to have a very bad evening." As if summoned by his words, Elena heard the sound of car doors slamming and shouting from outside. Through the front window, she could see Vincent's security team surrounding the SUVs, trapping Isabella's backup before they could react. Isabella realized her plan had failed completely. Her face twisted with rage and fear as she looked around the restaurant, searching for an escape route that didn't exist. "You think you're so smart," Isabella hissed at Vincent, "but you never would have figured it out without her." Isabella's finger pointed directly at Elena, who felt her world shift as both Vincent and Isabella focused their attention on her completely. "She's been watching us for weeks," Isabella continued, her voice rising with desperation and anger. "Your invisible little waitress has been spying on our conversations, listening to everything we said." Vincent turned to look at Elena with an expression she had never seen before. It wasn't indifference or dismissal, but intense, focused attention that made her feel exposed and vulnerable. "Is that true?" Vincent asked Elena directly. Elena's mouth went dry, but she forced herself to speak. "I was worried about you. She was asking too many questions, learning too much about your business. Something felt wrong." Vincent stood slowly, his gaze never leaving Elena's face. "You were protecting me." "I was trying to," Elena whispered, aware that everyone in the restaurant was now staring at them. Vincent walked toward Elena, and she fought the urge to step backward. When he reached her, he stopped just close enough that she could smell his cologne and see the intensity burning in his dark eyes. "What's your name?" Vincent asked, his voice soft but commanding. Elena blinked in surprise. After 3 years of serving him, he had never asked her name. "Elena," she said quietly. "Elena Martinez." "Elena," Vincent repeated, as if testing how it sounded. "You saved my life tonight, Elena Martinez." Behind them, Isabella was backing toward the door, but Vincent's men were already moving to block her exit. The restaurant had become a trap, and everyone inside understood that the balance of power had shifted dramatically. Vincent reached out slowly and touched Elena's face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. The gesture was gentle but possessive, and Elena felt her breath catch at the unexpected intimacy. "I've been blind," Vincent said, his voice rough with an emotion Elena couldn't identify. "You've been right here, watching over me, and I never saw you." Elena's heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. The invisible waitress who had served Vincent for 3 years was suddenly the center of his complete and undivided attention, and the intensity of his focus was overwhelming. "I see you now," Vincent continued, his hand still cupping her face, "and I'm never going to let you disappear again." Elena realized that her life had just changed forever. The safety of invisibility was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous and complicated. Vincent Torino, the man who had ignored her for years, was looking at her like she was the most important person in his world. The quiet waitress who had only wanted to finish nursing school and live a simple life had just become the obsession of one of the most powerful and dangerous men in the city. As Elena looked into Vincent's eyes, she understood that there would be no going back to the way things were before. The game had changed, and Elena was no longer a bystander watching from the shadows. She was now at the center of Vincent's world, whether she wanted to be there or not.